Aya hadn't planned to listen to it. She was clearing out her grandmother's phone 3 weeks after the funeral. It was a small, ordinary job, the kind you volunteer for because it's easier than sitting still, deleting expired reminders, a decade of half-finished notes. 400 photographs of the same balcony plant, photographed in what appeared to be every light the year had. Her father had asked her to wipe it before they returned it. He hadn't wanted to do it himself. Then she found it. One unplayed voicemail, recorded 11 years earlier, saved into her grandmother's own mailbox and never sent to anybody. The date on it was Aya's 18th birthday. She almost skipped it. Her thumb was already moving toward delete. Something she has never been able to name what made her press play instead. Her grandmother's voice came out of the speaker, younger, steadier than Aya had ever heard it in life. Aya, if you're hearing this, it means I never found the courage to tell you myself. Your mother didn't die in an accident. She left. She's alive. And I know exactly where. The phone nearly went out of her hand. 29 years. The car accident on the coast road. The closed casket. The single-framed photograph. Her father's grief, which she had grown up inside the way you grow up inside a climate, something with seasons, something you learn to dress for. All of it, according to a message an old woman had recorded on her granddaughter's 18th birthday, and then kept unsent for 11 years, was a story. A kind one, possibly, but not a true one. She sat down on her grandmother's bedroom floor with her back against the wardrobe and played it 11 more times. By the end, she had memorized the pauses, where Tara's breath caught, where she started a word and abandoned it, the small sound at the very end that might have been the beginning of I'm sorry and might have been nothing at all. It was 4 in the afternoon. She had a client call at 5. She sent an email saying she'd caught something and would reschedule, and then she stayed on the floor until the room went orange and then gray. Aya was 29. She lived alone in a 4th-floor flat with good light and a boiler that had opinions. She was good at her job in the specific, unglamorous way that gets a person promoted twice and noticed by nobody. She had not been with anyone for 2 years and had stopped experiencing this as a problem. She had, in place of a family that talked, one friend named Rana, who had known her since they were 19 and who answered the phone at any hour without asking why. She did not call Rana that night. She wasn't ready to say it out loud and hear how it sounded. Instead, she went back into the phone. The voicemail was stored in a folder, and the folder had other things in it. A photograph, time-stamped 4 years earlier. Her grandmother, thinner than Aya remembered from 4 years ago, or maybe Aya had simply never looked properly, sitting at a cafe table across from a woman in a dark coat. The woman's face was turned slightly away, caught mid-sentence. She had Aya's eyes. Not similar. The same. The specific asymmetry Aya had spent her adolescence disliking in mirrors, looking back at her out of a stranger's face. 4 years. Her grandmother had sat across a table from her mother 4 years ago, and then come to Aya's flat that autumn to complain about her neighbors and eat 2 slices of cake. Underneath the photograph was a folder Aya nearly missed, because it was named after a utility company. Scanned letters, dated across nearly 3 decades. She opened the earliest. You did the right thing leaving when you did. If you had stayed, in the state you were in this year, I don't know what would have happened to either of you. I will never tell her it was my idea. Let her believe you chose to go. It is easier for a child to be angry at a mother than to understand what almost happened. Aya read it 3 times. The date meant she had been 1 year old. She had not been abandoned by a woman who lost interest. She had been placed, deliberately, inside a story, and the author of that story had then spent 28 years making certain that nobody could read it but her. There were 41 letters. She read them in order, the way you'd read a case file, which is to say badly, going back, losing her place. In the early ones, her grandmother wrote long and often, and the tone was practical. Money, dates, what to tell people, what a child that age does and doesn't retain. Later they thinned. The gap stretched from months to years. By the last decade, the letters had become the kind of thing you send at Eid and at New Year, warm, careful, empty. And in among them, scanned like the rest but not written by her grandmother at all, was a birthday card. It had a cartoon horse on it. It was addressed to Aya, in handwriting she had never seen. Inside, in the same hand, 10 years old. I think about you every single day. I hope somebody is telling you that you are funny, because I remember that you were. It had been sent 19 years ago. It had never reached her. Her grandmother had scanned it before putting it somewhere Aya would never find it, or had scanned it precisely so that one day, in some way she never quite committed to, Aya would. That was the point at which Aya stopped being able to hold the whole thing at once. Because now the memories started arriving, and they arrived already reread. She was 9, and she asked at the dinner table why she had never been allowed to see her mother's face at the funeral, and her father put down his fork and left the room, and her grandmother said, without pausing, because of the accident, Habibti, it was better, and passed her the bread. There was one photograph of her mother in existence, and it was not in her father's house. It was on her grandmother's wall, in the corridor by the bathroom, in a frame that got dusted. Aya had always found that touching. The son who couldn't bear to look, the mother-in-law who kept the flame. It had never once occurred to her to wonder why the woman who kept the flame was the same woman who had put it out. She was 16, and her grandmother gave her a thin gold bracelet and said it had belonged to the family, and was strange about the question of whose it had been, in a way Aya had put down to old people and jewelry. She was 22 at her cousin's wedding, and her father's sister Nadia had 2 glasses of wine and took Aya's face in both hands and said, "You look so much like." And then her grandmother was there, at Aya's elbow, out of nowhere, saying that they needed Nadia for the photographs. 29 years of small, harmless moments, each with an explanation attached. All the explanations had come from one person. She got to the last letter at some point after midnight. It was dated 8 months earlier, weeks before the diagnosis, before the word stage entered the family's vocabulary. She's asking questions now. About you and about an accident story that neither of us should ever have allowed to harden into a fact. I am running out of time to be the one who tells her, instead of leaving her to find it in a drawer after I'm gone. I have told myself for years that the silence was love. I am no longer sure that it wasn't simply easier. Please, if I don't manage it, find her. Let her choose what she does with it. Her grandmother had known she was dying. She had written down, in her own hand, that Aya deserved the truth from her mouth. She had been given 8 months. And then she had died having said nothing, and left her granddaughter to find it in a drawer after she was gone. Exactly as predicted. Exactly as arranged. Aya did not call her father. Tucked behind the photograph in the physical album, she went to the album at 2 in the morning, and found it in 90 seconds, which meant it had been there her whole life, was a sticky note with a phone number on it. Blue ink gone slightly green. The number, impossibly, still connected. A woman answered on the 4th ring. "Hello." Aya's voice did not work the first time. Is this Farah?" The silence went on so long, she checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. Then, quietly, in a voice that had already understood, "Who is this?" "It's Aya." "Nothing." "I'm your daughter's." The line went dead. For 3 days, she told nobody. She went to work. She was, by all accounts, normal at work. She answered 40 emails and led a call about quarterly forecasting and remembered, afterwards, none of it. In the evenings, she sat with her phone face up on the table and the number on the screen and did not press it again, and could not have told anyone why. Something in her, had decided that the next move was not hers to make. That she had knocked once and would not knock twice, and that this was pride and also self-defense and also, possibly, terror. She wrote a message 11 times. You hung up on me. I'm not asking you for anything. I only want to know if you're alive, which I suppose I already do. She deleted all of them. On the second night, she called Rana and said it out loud and heard how it sounded, which was insane. Rana didn't say, "Are you sure?" and didn't say, "Maybe it's a mistake." She said, "Okay," and then after a while, "Do you want her to be a good person?" Because you're allowed to want that. You just have to know that's what you're doing. I don't know what I want. Then don't decide tonight. Some of this is hers to say first. On the fourth night, at 9:20, somebody knocked at Aya's door. The woman standing in the corridor was older than the cafe photograph by 4 years, and by rather more than 4 years. Gray at the temples, a coat too warm for the weather, the same eyes. She spoke before Aya could. Your grandmother sent me a picture of this building. 4 years ago. Her hands were in her pockets. I've had the address ever since. I've stood at the end of that street more times than I want to admit to you. Aya said nothing at all. I'm not going to be able to explain everything. I want to say that first, so you don't spend the whole evening waiting for the part where it makes sense. She glanced past Aya, into the flat, and then back. I'm here because you should be the one who decides what happens next. Not your grandmother. Not your father. Not whatever everybody agreed to say. I found the letters. Aya's voice came out flat and strange. I know she told you to go. Something went across the woman's face. Surprise first. Then something much heavier. The look of a person setting a weight down after carrying it so long that the arms have shaped themselves around it. She promised me she'd tell you herself, Farah said. When you were old enough for all of it. Not just the part where I'm the villain. Then tell me. All of it. Farah stepped inside her daughter's home for the first time and sat on the edge of the sofa without taking her coat off, and started. The year after you were born was the worst year of my life. I didn't have language for it. Nobody around me did either. Nobody in our family said the words postpartum depression out loud in those days. You were unwell, or you were tired, or you were ungrateful, and people chose whichever one was most convenient. She was looking at the carpet. Your grandmother noticed before I did. She used to come at 7 in the morning to take you so I could sleep, and she watched me for 3 months and said nothing. She didn't send me away because she was ashamed of me. She sent me away because one night in November, I told her I didn't trust myself to keep you safe. Aya's breath caught. You mean? I mean exactly that, and I'm not going to dress it up for you, and I'm not going to give you the details either, because they're mine. For a moment, there was steel in it. Then it went. She believed me. That's the thing I have never been able to be angry at her for. I told her something enormous, and she didn't argue with me, and she didn't tell me I was being dramatic. She moved faster than I could change my mind. I was on a bus to my cousin's in 4 days and in a hospital in 6. And the accident. That was hers. She said it was the only way to give you a clean grief instead of a complicated one. Farah's mouth moved. A closed casket instead of a question mark you'd carry your whole life. She had a way of saying things that made them sound already decided. Instead, I got 28 years of a dead mother, Aya said, and a grandmother who was writing to you the entire time and calling it protection. Yes. That's it. Yes. I'm not going to argue with you. You're right. Farah looked at her hands, and I let it stand for far longer than she ever asked me to. 6 years, and I was well. Genuinely well, working, sleeping. And by then the story had finished. Neatly. Without me in it. I didn't know how to walk back into a house where I was dead. She stopped. Every year I didn't try made the next year harder. And then there were 20 of them. Aya did not offer her the spare room. She did not ask her to leave either. Farah left at 1 in the morning, and they had said perhaps 400 words to each other, and it had taken 3.5 hours. The following weeks were not a reconciliation. They were an interrogation, conducted politely, in cafes, in careful waves. Some of it Farah answered well. Why the cafe? 4 years ago. Why then and not before, and why not after? Because she asked me to come. Farah turned her cup around. She wrote and said she'd decided to tell you. She wanted to see me first. In person. A pause. I understood afterwards what that meeting actually was. She wanted to look at my face and decide whether I was somebody she was willing to hand you to. She sat there for 2 hours and she was warm and funny and she asked about my flat. And at the end she said I'll be in touch about the arrangements. And then she wrote to me 6 weeks later and said she'd thought about it and the timing wasn't right. Farah looked up. I was interviewed. And I failed and nobody told me why. Some of it she did not answer well at all. Would you have come, Aya said on a Thursday 6 weeks in, if I hadn't called you? Farah put her cup down and looked out of the window at the traffic and said, that isn't a fair question. It's the only question. Ask me something else. She wouldn't. Not that week or the week after. And Aya learned that the difference between a person who is hiding something and a person who is protecting you from an answer is, from the outside, nothing at all. There was one question left in her, and it wasn't for her mother. Does my father know you're back? Farah hesitated. He knows I contacted your grandmother years ago. He doesn't know I contacted you. Which meant it had stopped being only Aya's to carry. She drove to her father's house on a Sunday and sat in his kitchen, under the strip light he had never replaced, and told him. He didn't speak for a long time, long enough that she began to be frightened of what she'd done. Then he said, I don't want to talk about this. You don't. Aya. He put both hands flat on the table. I am asking you. Please. Don't do this. She's my mother and she's alive, and I'm sitting in your kitchen telling you I've met her, and you don't want to talk about it. That's right. She left. She sat in her car outside his house for 20 minutes, and then she drove home, and for 9 days she didn't call him, and he didn't call her, and she understood that she was being outlasted. That this was a technique. That it had worked on somebody before. On the 10th day she went back. She didn't sit down. She stood in his kitchen with her keys still in her hand and said, I know what Tara did. I know it was her idea. I have the letter where she says she'll never tell me it was her idea. She watched him. So there's nothing left for you to protect. Unless there's something I don't have. Her father looked at the table for a very long time. I promised her I'd never tell you unless you asked me directly, he said. Then I'm asking you directly. He exhaled, the sound of a man setting down a breath he had been holding for decades. Your mother didn't only leave because she was ill. She left because I asked her to go. The refrigerator hummed. I was 24. He said it flatly, the way people say things they have rehearsed alone in cars. I was terrified of her, and I was terrified of you, and I had no idea what was happening in my own house. I went to your grandmother, and I told her I couldn't do both. Raise you and watch your mother come apart in front of me. I said, he stopped and started again. I said one of them has to go, and it can't be the baby. I made the call. Your grandmother carried it out. And then she let me disappear into being the widower, instead of the man who sent his wife away. The room went quiet. Everything Aya had rebuilt over the past 2 months. A story in which one formidable old woman had made one impossible, protective decision, and then guarded it to the grave, shifted again. One more layer down. It kept doing that. It was going to keep doing that. You let me believe you only ever lost her, she said. Not that you chose it. Yes. 28 years. You watched me put flowers on a grave. I know exactly how many years it was. He looked up at her, and his face was wet, and he didn't wipe it. I have told myself it was mercy. For you. For me. Maybe even for her. In the end, she did get well, she did get a life. I don't know anymore which parts of it were mercy, and which parts were just easier. I stopped being able to tell the difference somewhere around your 12th birthday. Aya took it to her mother 2 days later, in the same cafe, at the same table, because it had become theirs in the way things do. She had expected anger, or defense, or an old argument picking itself up from where it had been set down. Farah went completely still. She told me it was hers, she said. For 28 years, she told me it was hers. She wrote it down. I still have the letter, I have it in a box, I've read it 100 times. She said the decision was hers and that she would carry it. She was covering for him. She was covering for him. Farah pressed the heels of both hands against her eyes and held them there. I hated her for it. Quietly. For nearly 30 years, I hated a woman who saved my life, and I let myself do it, because it was so much easier than hating him. She gave me somebody to blame, so I'd never look past her at him. That was a kindness in her mind. She would have thought of it as a kindness. She dropped her hands. She let me be the one who left. She let him be the one who grieved. She let you be the one who was protected. And she kept the part where she decides. A breath that didn't steady anything. She wrote everybody a role. She buried me twice. And I let her do it, because the first time it saved my life. Aya was the one who put them in a room. She didn't ask either of them whether they wanted it, because she already knew the answer, and because she had noticed by then that every significant event of her life had been arranged in a conversation she wasn't in. She chose the date. She chose the place, her own kitchen, 4th floor, good light, not her father's house and not the cafe. She told them both to come at 3 o'clock on a Saturday, and she said one thing before either of them arrived, standing at her own counter, to nobody. Then she said it again when they were both sitting down. Nobody is deciding anything about me in another room. Not ever again. They sat across from each other for the first time in 28 years, at a table too small for it. Her father had brought flowers, which was so misjudged that Aya had to look away. Farah had brought nothing and kept her coat on. For the first 10 minutes, it was unbearable and completely banal. Traffic. The stairs. Whether the tea was too strong. Her father broke first. I'm not going to ask you to forgive me. Good, Farah said. I'd have said no. I know. You didn't visit. Not once in 6 years. Not to check if I was alive. Her voice stayed low and even, which was worse. She sent money. You didn't write a line. No. You let a 70-year-old woman do it. All of it. The letters, the lying, the deciding. You handed her your whole life to hold, and then you were sad about it for 30 years, in front of your daughter, at the table. Vera stopped. Her hand was shaking around the cup, and she noticed it and put the cup down. And the terrible thing, the genuinely terrible thing, is that if you'd asked me at the time, that November, I'd have agreed with you. I'd have said the same thing. Get her away from me. Her father started to cry, badly, the way men cry when they've had no practice. And Farah did not reach across the table to him, and Aya saw that she didn't, and let it be true, and did not fill the silence. Nobody was forgiven. It went on for 2 more hours and finished nothing. But nobody walked out either. That turned out to be the thing that mattered. At the door at the end, with her coat already buttoned, Farah said, You asked me a question in the cafe. In September. I awaited. Whether I'd have come if you hadn't called me. Farah looked at the corridor wall, not at her. No. I don't think I would have. I'd have kept standing at the end of the street. I'd have told myself it was for your sake, and I'd have gone on doing it until one of us was dead. She met Aya's eyes then, and did not ask to be excused for any of it. You should know that about me. You should know it now, and not in 15 years from a letter. As she left, Aya stood in the doorway for a while after the lift had gone. That, in the end, was the only part anybody had given her straight. Some days after that, Aya was furious at a version of events 28 years too late to change, assembled out of decisions two frightened people had made about her before she was old enough to have a say in any of it, and then defended by a third who had loved her and lied to her with the same hand. Other days she found herself, unexpectedly, grateful, that imperfectly, badly, at a cost none of them ever accounted for, several damaged people had tried to keep a wound off a child who couldn't have understood it. She never resolved which of those feelings was the correct one. She stopped expecting herself to. That turned out to be a thing you could just decide to stop doing. She never wiped her grandmother's phone. She told her father the shop had said it was too old to take back, which was a lie and a small one, and she noticed that it came to her easily that it was, apparently, in the blood. It's in a drawer in her kitchen. It charged. She has never once deleted the message.